for rabbit?
Rabbit casserole, delicious.
Right, OK, we'll ask the panel that, because it is now time for Head to Head.
Head to Head.
Well, joining us this morning, I'm delighted to say are Stella Chadakido, and also, who is a former Labour aide, and also Noah Khogali, Conservative councillor for Strathern. Good morning to the two of you.
How are you?
Morning.
Yeah, good, thanks. Very festive hat.
Thank you.
And less festive sling.
I know, but it means I've got experience recently of A&E if we do get on to that.
Oh, well, we are getting on to that.
Research.
But he got the memo about the colour.
Yeah.
You did indeed. Very, very green indeed. Let's start with a really serious story. We started talking about this with Johnny just before the break. This is where we are in terms of Israel. I said it's really fascinating, isn't it, how one day all the papers concentrate on what's going on in Israel and Gaza, and then it sort of drops off the agenda and then it comes back on. And we're gearing up for Christmas, and those people who are caught in the middle of this, of course, aren't. In terms of the latest here, the Israeli military mistakenly says it killed 3 hostages during its campaign in Gaza. They were misidentified as a threat. This is Yotam Haim, just 28, Sama Talalka, 22, and Alon Shamriz, 26. They were shot by troops operating in northern Gaza. Over 100 hostages remain in captivity. The IDF actually came out very quickly to say the incident was under investigation and expressed their condolences. Now, hundreds of people have gathered in central Tel Aviv following the announcement and marched on an IDF military base in the city, calling on the government to secure a deal for the release of the remaining hostages. Stella, I know you feel very passionately about this. This is carrying on. We've got something like 1.52 million people moving south. We've obviously got the Israeli forces continuing in their military operation at the moment with backing from the West. How do you see this unfolding now? Is there still Western resolve behind them?
So the thing is, David, you have people moving to the south. They've been told to move to the south, and now we know that Israel is also bombing the south. So nowhere is safe. You have reports from coming out of Gaza of journalists constantly dying, their families dying, being bombed by Israel. You have reports of more bombs being dropped on some days in Gaza than in a whole week during the Afghanistan war. And you have Western allies of Israel, instead of being a good friend and advising Israel on what's going to happen in the future. So this does mean that Netanyahu has to step back, because politically there is no appetite for his leadership right now, and he's blocking any actual solutions. So Netanyahu doesn't want to see Fatah going anywhere near control of Gaza. He doesn't want to allow the Palestinian Authority to control Gaza. His plan for what's going to happen to Gaza is clearly for Israel to occupy the territory. And in my opinion, he's trying to do a land grab as well. He does want to grab as much land as possible.
So this then speaks to these comments made by the Israeli ambassador, which I think are hugely significant. And actually, I was very shocked when I heard that, because we've been talking in the West about a two-state solution for a long time. The UK's policy is a two-state solution. It seems the right thing to me that you allow people to coexist in peace together. And something has to give. No two-state solution, she said. No Palestinian state. We live here. This is our country, the historical state of our ancestors. We will never allow a state to be established between the Jordan and the sea. And that mirrors that chant, of course, from the river to the sea. Now, that was set out, the two-state solution, in the Oslo Accords in the 1990s. Two states living side by side. The original idea was the West Bank and Gaza would form Palestine. And the US backing is predicated on that two-state solution. So by saying that, it flies in the face of 40 years of policy by the United States. I was surprised.
Yeah, it does seem an interesting line to take, and one has to obviously assume that she is speaking on behalf of the government, and that is somewhat concerning. But it does speak to something which I think has been avoided in terms of the discourse, especially in the West, so far in this conflict, which is, what are we looking at as the end point here? Because, you know, we can debate how we get to this end point, but we're not having a proper discussion about whether, number one, whether a two-state solution is the right idea. I think it personally is, and it's what I think everyone would, or most people would like to see happen. But then we have to really grapple with the fact, is that realistic? And that's a tough conversation to have. It's really hard, but it's one that we really need to begin having.
But wouldn't you have thought that Netanyahu in the US or in the UK would have sat down and said, what is the endpoint before we continue to help you?
They might have had those conversations in private, but I think we've seen with how toxic these debates become very quickly in public. There's a lot of strong feeling on both sides, and it might not actually be that productive at the moment to be talking about
everything that you have just said. You have said without mentioning Palestine or Israel once. You've said the West, you've said the US.
Yes.
You haven't said what Palestine or the US wants. And let's face it.
No, the US, Palestine
or Israel wants. And let's face it.
What does Israel want?
What does Israel want? Over the last 40 years, Palestine has never accepted a two-state solution.
But always for very good reasons. Always for very good reasons, because Israel has always been blocking any...
Let Dr. Renee finish.
OK, the two-state solution which has been proposed has been rejected by Hamas 7 times.
Indeed.
They have never accepted it. We didn't go to Zelensky when Russia invaded them and said, you know what, you should just put down your guns because we need peace. We didn't do that.
So what's
Israel
the endpoint?
is the only... Israel have to be allowed to decide their own fate. And
What is the endpoint, Doctor?
Israel have to be able to defend themselves and do it as they see fit.
But this comes back to Noah's point. What's the endpoint? Because there has to be...
So Israel have said endpoint is the destruction of Hamas.
Right. So
for them means the destruction of Gaza. They've already, over half of the infrastructure in Gaza has been ruined.
Does that change the way that people in the West feel about this? If it is,
I think it does change.
You see, I think it does.
The thing is, what really impresses me, David, is how people will talk about these comments made by the Israeli ambassador as if it's the first time that we are hearing that the Israeli government and Israeli politicians do not support a two-state solution, when we know for a fact they haven't even been trying to hide it over all of these years, that they don't want a two-state solution. The best solution for them, the best solution for the Israeli government has and always has been, their policy has been to try and divide the Palestinians, try and divide the West, and always have the excuse the Palestinians are too dangerous.
But Hamas
you cannot trust them.
Well, so Renee's point is very valid, which is that actually Hamas doesn't want a two-state solution, does it?
And Hamas have said, the leaderships, very recently, within the last 2 weeks, that they will repeat the massacre again and again.
And not only that, but targeting Jews in Europe as well. So that is very clear. So how do you can't negotiate with terrorists?
I think the solution here might be, at least in the short to medium term, and I've seen this mooted, I think it was Jordan Osman and Ed Balls that were talking about it, was potentially a protectorate-style system just for the time being.
How would that work?
Where you can remove Hamas from government whilst getting other, Middle Eastern nations to kind of step in and try and help.
The other Middle Eastern nations don't want to do that. And frankly, you cannot get buy-in from Palestinians for that. The problem here is that Israel doesn't want to allow, and hasn't wanted to allow for a very long time, democracy to exist in Palestine. They've done this for decades.
One at a time. So the most democratic government in the Middle East, the only democratic government in the Middle East where gays and straight people are side by side and are happy, do not want democracy in a country where they're not allowed to have a democracy by the people who are in charge.
But how do you explain the fact that they have been they suppressed the opposition to Hamas when it first existed?
Allegedly.
There is evidence for that. There is evidence by government officials from Israel going decades back.
Let's just go back.
The whole time there is I'm sure there is concrete evidence that there have been Israeli politicians saying that it is to their benefit that Hamas is the one who wins the elections, so that the West cannot support Palestine. There is evidence. They have supported and encouraged Hamas.
No.
Yeah, what is the solution then?
That's where I'm going.
Netanyahu needs to back down. Netanyahu needs to back down. He needs to leave. He's had his time.
And Hamas?
The Biden administration needs to negotiate with the Israeli government and to allow for democratic representation in Palestine.
Oh, what do they do with Hamas? Let's just talk about Hamas in that, please.
Yeah, well,
they don't want a two-state solution. That's the problem.
So what happens?
You will have to accept that there will be political representation right now there will be political.
Let's just go back and look at the geopolitics, because this is important, because Israel in 2000 did offer Gaza and 73% of the West Bank, which was rejected by Arafat. In 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza, as we know, and removed Jewish families as well. There was a blockade imposed at that point. Back in 2008, Israel then offered 94% of the West Bank and additional land adjacent to Gaza. Isn't this an intractable problem? Because actually, even though the US, the UK, Western allies say a two-state solution is the sensible solution, the other parties, both parties,
all the while they are continuing to support settlers. They are continuing to support them both economically and militarily.
Let me just get Noah to answer this. I'm just trying to be the good referee here. Isn't that the problem?
That is the fundamental problem, is that we always talk about this period in the last century especially, where we in the West kind of looked at other parts of the world where we know how to fix your problems. And we've done that again.
That's a really interesting point.
And we don't recognise that we're doing the same thing once again. And look, again, we can debate whether we still think a two-state solution is the right thing. It doesn't mean that we think it's the wrong thing. But we are just repeating the same thing as we've gone over.
No, the difference here, Noah, is that Israel is trying to expand its borders. It's been trying to do that for a long time.
But Hamas is trying to wipe them off the map.
Can I just come in here?
Yes.
Can I just come in here? The problem here is there was a ceasefire and people were living side by side, and Hamas decided to undertake a massacre on the 7th of October, where they sent a very strong message. I'm going to finish what I'm going to say, Stella. They sent a very strong message to the Jewish people. They burnt bodies. Do you know the last time Jewish bodies were burnt, Stella? It was in the Holocaust.
Oh, that's a strong argument.
Yes, it is a strong argument.
That is such a strong argument.
Right, let me finish. They sent a message where they cut off genitals, they burnt bodies.
I think that's enough for the...
But it's true.
But it's breakfast, Renee, it's breakfast.
And they sent a message to the Jewish people when they then said, we're going to do this to you time and time again until you don't exist. The solution that you've just suggested, you cannot even tell us how you can stop Hamas from doing that again.
Why are they not allowing Fatah then? Why is Israel blocking Fatah? It's not Hamas. They are also blocking Fatah from...
Hamas have 139 hostages still.
Fatah.
Okay, so we're just arguing over different points. Maybe it is an intractable problem. I don't think we're going to solve it.
Let's keep them all then.
Well, no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there needs to be international effort here. But it's gone on for a very long time, and there are civilians caught on both sides of this, and I'm just very mindful of that. Time is very tight. I think it's time we had a pause and regroup.
Ceasefire.
Well, indeed, a ceasefire. Let's just go to a break. We'll resume our head-to-head after this break. This is TalkTV. Dr. Rennie. Let's move on to Christmas cards, because these fill me with dread. I started writing them in November.
Oh, my God.
Well, I had to, but to get the ones over to the States and the ones abroad. And then I was just thinking, do people still send Christmas cards? Do young people send Christmas cards?
I have never sent a Christmas card, unfortunately.
Why?
The handwriting is terrible. It will look like it's being done by a 4-year-old, which might be quite sweet. But
sweet.
That's not really what I'm going for if I was supposed to be sending Christmas cards.
Estella, do you send Christmas cards?
No, but when I do receive them, I think it's remarkable, especially when it's from people my age. I'm like, oh my God, you're such a nice person.
I agree with that, because in the old days I used to get loads of them, and then they festoon the house, and but I don't get, well, maybe it's because I don't see anyone anymore because I'm always here. Do you send Christmas cards?
I send a few, and then I also do e-cards, which are really good. Some of the ones you pay for are really good, and they're really animated.
Is it the same having an e-card?
Maybe not, but it's about time and money.
It is about time and money.
Yeah.
It's so expensive. Well, just talking about that, because the politicians have released their Christmas cards, let's have a look at Rishi Sunak's. Because basically they say you should never judge a book by its cover, but how about politicians? Should you judge them by their Christmas cards? Now, Rishi Sunak had a shocking year, I think it's fair to say. And I wonder whether he's transposed his shocking year into this dreadful Christmas card, in my opinion. It's absolutely dreadful. It's a dreadful card. It's a black and white image where he's photoshopped 5 stars, which basically is not what he would be voted. He's got a photo, a sort of squiggly Santa hat on. His wife's got a Christmas tree on her head for some reason. What does that say, Noah, about Rishi Sunak and his state of mind?
I don't know. To his credit, he might just be distracted at the moment, understandably, so maybe not that much time went into it. But it strikes me every year they've got months to prepare. It's not like Christmas is a surprise trees every time, and often they just look like it took 5 minutes. But it really does feel like somebody should be putting a bit more effort into some of these.
I like it.
Why do you like it?
It's black and white, it's pretty, it's his family, he's cuddling his daughter. I love it.
Stella?
David, I think the writing is in the Christmas card for Rishi Sunak. Just shows that it's black and white because it's going to be a tragedy at the general elections.
I agree. It's not a surprise. I would have done a nice Christmas scene with your family, for example, not just stuck weird hats and a Christmas tree on your one thing.
It looks a bit like, do you remember that drawing program on Microsoft? I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Yeah.
OK, let's move on and look at Boris Johnson's Christmas card now. So Boris Johnson has taken a very different approach. He's dressed as Santa Claus and he's climbing up a Christmas tree. Looks like he's had a couple of sherries whilst he's doing that. He's got Wilf, his son, with him. What do we make of that then, Noah?
Again, this looks like one that they just forgot it with Christmas and they went, oh, we need to do something.
Also, well, I wonder whether it represents his character. Lopsided, a little out of control, huge tree, completely out of control, festooned in a like throwing things at it.
Yeah, very much. And it doesn't look like the decorations are particularly well balanced there either, which again might speak to Boris Johnson.
Have you tried decorating a tree with a 4-year-old?
No, I have not, but I imagine it's quite hard.
I have decorated trees with children, and then they put the things on, and then I change
all
them.
in one spot.
All in one spot, and then I try to say you spread them out. Actually, now as they've got older, they're very good at it. Stella, what do you make of Boris Johnson's?
Not to be too mean, David, but I think given Boris's media experience, I think he's chosen this massive tree to make him look slim and trim.
Oh, good
I'm just
point.
saying, that's what I would do.
And what about the chaotic, lopsided tree? Does that say anything about his character?
I think he wanted it to reflect his creative flair, one would say.
OK, maybe. Let's move on to Liz Truss. Now, I think this is the most prime ministerial card of them all, actually. Look at that. So solid in front of a fire. She's exuding warmth and friendliness. What do you think, Noah?
I'd say presidential potentially more than prime ministerial.
Interesting.
Which I'm not a huge fan of in British politics broadly. It's something that very much irks me that we're becoming more like the Americans. So something a bit more British, maybe.
She looks very open and friendly, doesn't she?
She does.
Yeah.
Boring.
Why boring?
Come on, I think
traditional.
I think politicians, once they leave the highest...
What do you want her to do? Roller skate?
Highest office. No, but you know Ed Miliband, for example, right?
Yes.
Once he stopped being leader, he started being a lot more creative with his image, and I enjoyed it so much in 2017. David, I was telling you before, he did this amazing Christmas card where he was sitting wearing a leather jacket on a motorbike, wearing glasses and eating a bacon sarnie.
Okay.
Which I loved. It was, if you remember that...
So taking the mick out of yourself.
Exactly. Yes, that's what you need to do. When you're leaving the highest office, you should just start enjoying
he didn't send one to his brother.
Oh, yes, well, maybe. Let's look at Jeremy Hunt now. I think this is an absolutely miserable one as well. Let's have a look at Jeremy Hunt's Christmas card. Noah?
At least he looks like he's with his family and they all like each other.
Yes. The dog's
to be honest,
but the dog's not very interesting.
No, but it is hard to get a dog to pay attention, to be fair. I've tried before. I don't mind it, broadly.
Does it say Christmas?
It just says winter walk, I suppose.
I wonder whether it says frugal chancellor, can't be bothered, not spending any money on this.
They're not wearing warm enough clothes,
they're
guys.
not.
I'm sorry, I'm really...
What do you think of that, then? Is there much festive cheer?
No, I wanted him to look a bit happier. Come on, what's this angle? Like, it's just a weird...
It does look like something.
Was it the dog's friend that took the photo? Who took the photo from that angle?
Really?
I don't believe he's got enough friends to even send a box of Christmas.
Oh, shots fired.
It is quite interesting. Do you think, I mean, as a medic, do you think their personality traits are reflected in those cards?
I would imagine so.
I think they are.
Because everything we do is, you and I both know, we've done psychiatry.
Yours would be very glittery.
If you go into a room with somebody and they're really depressed, you come out feeling down.
Yes.
If you go in and they're manic, you come out feeling high.
Yes. Let's move on because time is tight. I want to move on to this. Now, Dr. Rennie found this story, but I'd actually weirdly already picked it, which makes me realise that we're so in tune. It's kind of weird. Now, this is about aircraft, because lots of people flying abroad at this time of year. And It really irks me when, and I think many people, when you're put next to someone who is what the Americans call heavy. Well, since the 1960s, the number of obese people in the US aged 20 and above has increased from 10% of the population to 42% of the population by 2020. Now, at the same time, airplane seats, the width of them has decreased by as much as 3 inches over the last 3 decades. And I started looking at the US airlines and what you do if you're heavy. Now, most airlines give you a seatbelt extender. You can choose to purchase an additional seat or upgrade to a higher class of fare, which gives you more personal space. But there is a movement in the US for plus-sized people who say they often face calls to simply avoid air travel, which they feel is unreasonable. So one American airline is offering overweight customers up to 2 extra seats for free if they encroach onto their neighbours during their flights. This is Southwest Airlines. They offer customers of size extra seats at the boarding gate, which is being praised for its inclusivity despite some concern other passengers risked being turned away. What are your thoughts?
At first, it felt ridiculous, and I was slightly annoyed. But then I did think about it a bit more, and I suppose if I'd be less annoyed by the fact they're getting a free seat than if they didn't, and I ended up having to, shift into the very much small corner of my seat.
Would you be less annoyed if you got bumped off the flight because your seat had been given away?
I hope the airlines have a bit more.
No, they're bumping people.
They are. So they recommend that overweight passengers book 2 seats on the plane in advance, and then they get a refund from the airline at the end of their journey. But but I don't really understand how that works.
No one's going to do that.
No, they won't do that.
Yeah.
Stella, so the issue I have with this is, as someone who's getting fatter by the minute, the amount I'm eating at the moment.
You look fine.
Well, bless you. But I have my bag flies. I pay per kilo of my bag. How about we pay per kilo, dare I say, for you and your bag?
No, I think, David, that would be cruel. I think that's not very nice. I do understand people saying, don't get me wrong, I think the obesity crisis is something very bad. I think it's bad for your health. But I do think it's cruel, almost, to accuse these people of literally just wanting to fly. I mean, people can become obese for all sorts of reasons. I think it's really, really cruel, and these headlines as well, I think they are stigmatizing people.
OK, we need to go back to personal responsibility here because, yes, people can be obese for all sorts of reasons, but most of the reasons are that they eat too much. That is a fact. So, the thing here is what we're doing is we're too scared now to say that. We're too scared to say you are damaging your health because you're overweight, which you are. You're going to get cancer because you're overweight, which we are too scared of. What we're doing here is rewarding people actually for being overweight by saying, do you know what? Don't be squashed. Have another seat. Again, inclusivity here, as it is in so many other areas of life, is actually exclusivity for most people.
No, but say that someone is obese, right? Someone is obese. They can't just snap their fingers and stop being obese.
So let's just go back to my idea, and it is quite a draconian idea, but it's predicated on weight equals fuel for the aircraft. It is more expensive to fly plus size.
That would be discriminating them.
Yes.
So if you're pregnant, when I'm pregnant...
Oh, OK. I hadn't thought of that. OK, that's it.
But we're not talking about pregnant people here. We're talking about obese people. We're not talking about pregnant people.
OK, but what about people who, had an accident or were depressed or they had other mental health problems and that led them, which a lot of obese people, you live in an obesogenic environment.
You do.
You do. When you do have one bad thing happen to you, it is so much easier to other people go to alcohol or drugs. Some people go to food.
Not all heavy people are obese as well. That's fantastic.
I mean, there's a brilliant quote here. There's a spectrum of fatness. As a super fat individual, you need to start having different accommodations. I just felt happy there was something like this for people. I do think it comes down to personal responsibility. Talking of which, very quickly, if we can, there's a brilliant line in something called Pop Bitch, which is all the gossip from from television and show business, which says which millionaire comedian and TV presenter collected all the free toiletries from the hotels he stayed in on tour, then wrapped them up and re-gifted them to staff at his agency. One lucky staffer got the contents of a Virgin Airlines vanity kit as a thank you present. Is it ever acceptable to take freebies, wrap them up and give them as a Christmas present?
That's really funny. My sister goes often when she'll go to a hotel, she'll come back with all these small shampoos and everything, and I don't think she's ever gifted them to anyone because it'd be quite obvious where they'd come from. I don't think you can buy them normally, but very funny idea.
Very funny idea. But look, cost of a living crisis, maybe it's okay. You get the toiletries from the hotel.
This individual is clearly someone extremely wealthy.
Yeah.
That's what I don't understand. Why is it always the extremely wealthy people?
Because that's why they're wealthy.
Yes, that's why.
Do you know, as it says in Willy Wonka, the greedy always beat the needy.
Oh, very good, Franny. You've what's a Christmas present you should never give?
That one.
Is there a Christmas present you should never give?
The present that they gave you last year?
A weighing scale.
Sorry?
A weighing scale.
A weighing scale?
People often hate on socks, but I personally really do like some fun socks.
So as I've got older, I agree. I like socks.
Do you know my mum bought me a shovel and fork this year for the garden?
Quite right. You need to do some work for a change. I'm being told that you should never give a present, which is my waistcoat, to anyone. Thank you for that. Thank you to both of you. Very good to see both of you. That's Stella Chadakido and also Noah Khogali. And that was today's Head to Head.